So today we're going to cover the 18 to 24-year-olds. So hopefully we can have some good conversation to help out the online students and writing up their documents and their takeaways and things of that nature. So when we look at, we haven't gotten to the 24 to 32 series yet, but certainly going to be doing that lecture as well and posting it, even though it's not going to be an assignment. I think there's a lot of interesting takeaways. One of the things that's an interesting takeaway, which does impact the 18 to 24-year-olds and 12 to 18-year-olds, is the comparison of free time once you get out of college to high school in the college years. And the average in the United States, surveys in 2016, 2017, 2018 showed that the average person post college between the ages of 25 to 32 who was raising a family, buying a house, starting a job, starting a career, ended up with about 1 hour of what they call dedicated free time, or time that can be used for gaming, per day, per week. Which is interesting because if you look at the data on high school kids and college kids, it can be as high as 4 hours a day. Now, and obviously you wouldn't want to fill that with all games if you're a parent, but certainly a portion of that time is going to be filled with games. I know with my 11-year-old, if I let him play, he'll play for 4 to 6 hours a day. And some of his friends do play that much per day. And obviously that's not something you can do when you're starting a career and doing all those wonderful things. Another thing too is I want to remind folks that the things that we talk about from 6 to 12 and 12 to 18, it's not as though they disappear once you become 18 to 24. Many of those things continue, and they just get more intelligent, right? Because your cognitive resources go up, your brain's developing more, you have more experiences, so you understand more options to you, and what to do in the world and things of that nature. And one of the things that we also see is brain growth starts to really slow down in these years. So, and a lot of people say that at like 20, 21, 22 years old, your brain is no longer growing. It hits a curve and now it's dying. So it dies all the way to, when you finally pass away, later on in life, hopefully, late into your 90s or something like that, depending on how long you want to live. So it's an interesting thing when you look at it. It's like this is the first lecture we've covered 6 to 12, 12 to 18. This is the first lecture where we're saying like, oh yeah, it's like cognitive resources are really high, and you could do some wonderful things with your brain. And I think it's interesting. And, there's the biology part of it that we talk about in each lecture. And then once again, there's the cultural rites of passage. And we're focusing on the West in this lecture series because a lot of the game companies I work with are not from the West, yet they want to design games for the West. And that's where these lecture series became very impactful, is because it opens up individuals' eyes to like, okay, hey, these are things we don't even think about. Like there isn't a big understanding in other cultures that 18 is a rite of passage in the United States. You're an adult. That's a big thing. And also you're out of high school. And now you're going to go off and become something. And everybody knows it. And there's a lot. I mean, if you all can remember back, I don't know, Alex, if you can remember back to that moment when you're in your senior year of high school and you're like, it's real now. Like I have to go do something. And that can be quite an interesting experience. This first one I think is interesting because if you start to look at autonomy, we really haven't talked about that yet. We didn't talk about it, certainly did not talk about it in 6 to 12. And maybe we briefly talked about it in 12 to 18 when we talked about peer pressure and involvement in groups and maybe moving away from the family or having some conflict with your parental units at this point. But this is an interesting concept, and it is its own design pillar. And it's certainly related to two things. Your brain is fully developed, and also you're moving on. You're out of high school now. The government considers you an adult capable of making your own decisions, and you certainly don't have to listen to your parents anymore. You can vote for your, you can do all kinds of interesting things that you couldn't do before. And a lot of people say that, autonomy is this weird sort of like first understanding what you can do and then playing within those boundaries. And it can take years to fully understand how free you actually are. Um, and I was talking to Alex a bit before class on this, but it's interesting from my perspective. When I got to college, before I got to college, I didn't play games that allowed a lot of personal growth and development and moral decisions, like single player action adventure games. But when I got to college, all my friends were playing them, right? And because I worked in a computer lab and I was around lots of gamers and this and that, and they started to introduce me to these games, and I was like, they resonated with me. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I get to make decisions now, and I enjoy that. And one of the things we measure in the UX lab is freedom of choice. We measure this construct of freedom, like how free do you feel to do the things you want to do. Do any of you remember, like, when was the first sort of like role playing game that you played where you have freedom of choice? Not Dungeons and Dragons, because that's a little bit different. And oftentimes you don't have freedom of choice in Dungeons and Dragons. You're on rails in a module or something like that. You have the illusion of freedom. But for video games, like, what's the first memorable single player game that you've got in your memory? It doesn't necessarily have to be at 18. And once again, these are not like finite, numbers where you like, oh, the autonomy only occurs at 18. It certainly can occur earlier for some individuals, the seeking out and development of it. Anybody remember the first sort of single player adventure game you played, like, Assassin's Creed or Thief, or
Dead
you
Space.
make, what was that?
Dead Space, I think might be. I'm not sure if that fits it. That's definitely the first like single player game that I felt I had a lot more independence in. Mostly because it was a horror game, and I was a kid back then. It was the first time I was like, I can play this without fear of my parents getting mad at me for playing it. If that works.
How old were you when you played that?
I had to been, man, I had to been like 15, 16, I
Did it
think.
did it give you freedom of choice? Like, you felt like you could choose your own adventure?
To a degree, yeah. While it was a linear game, I definitely felt like I could kind of explore at my own pace and kind of deal with situations in my own way.
Yeah,
Um,
like branching dialogue trees and things of that nature.
stuff, yeah, stuff like that. If
Yeah.
I remember correctly, yeah.
Now, if you had to compare it to a Fallout game, like Bethesda, where you kind of have that open world setting, and oh, would you say it's a lot less freedom of choice in a game like that,
Less,
or?
much less as compared to like a Bethesda RPG.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting when I talk to individuals about those real open world sort of choose your own adventure games. Rarely do I hear them say it's like any younger than 16 or 17 years old. No, it's and when I look at, we did some research with kids, and it was based on Skylanders, and this is going back 7-8 years now, maybe even longer than that. And one of the interesting findings was that they simply don't play games like this, right? They play very straightforward games. I mean, Rocket League and Skylanders, Roblox, and things of that nature. And it's interesting because I was like, well, Roblox gives you complete freedom within a very simple game mechanic system. There's no like real social, interactions, and like, being a villain and destroying a Roblox world. I guess you could do that on your own and pretend in your head, but certainly the game design isn't built in to support that. You have to do that game design in your head. But and it's a building block game. So I see elements of it with young children, but it's most related to skill learning, like skill acquisition, not related to going, oh, I can be completely independent and make moral decisions and have moral reflections around the world, similar to what would happen in a Bethesda game, where, according to this particular slide, You have independence from others on thoughts, emotions, and actions. And thoughts, emotions, and actions are built into that game. You get to see my choices cause this to occur, and I don't care what anybody else thinks. These are my decisions now, and that can be very interesting. And the regulation of one's behavior doesn't mean regulating it in a positive way. When I talk to individuals who play games like Fallout, the most fun they have is when they play as a villain, or that and of course they wouldn't do that in the real world. These individuals that I know and hang out with tend to be pretty straight, narrow path individuals in life. But it's interesting when you start to look at autonomy. Like, okay, people are growing, they're trying to separate, and the key is they're wanting to make their own decisions, have their own thoughts, have their own emotions, and explore that. And whether you like it or not, it's thrown on you. So I remember my freshman year of college, it hit me for the first time. No one's going to make me go to class. I can pretty much do what I want during the day. And I found a lot of free time real quick. I'm like, well, how do I fill this? And I went and got a job. I was like, I might as well make money. And because I was going to run out of the money I saved for my freshman year of college really fast. And but it's like I could kind of do what I want. If I want to take a nap, I take a nap. If I want to do this, whatever. And I remember it really hit me the first time I went to the library to study, and I fell asleep on my textbook. And I woke up and I had been in the library for hours, and I was like, oh man, was I snoring or whatever else? And like, am I going to get in trouble? And it's like, no, I can do what I want. And that sense of freedom is something that really hits people in the rite of passage, but it can become addictive. And for a lot of college players, it does become addictive. So I only have data from a few companies on this, but certainly when they make these single player, completely autonomous open world games, they see a large influx of players 16, 17, 18 college years. And if you look at the curves of people that tend to clump into games, you don't see a lot of younger kids playing these games. Probably for two reasons. They're too complex to understand. There's too much going on. And also, the ESRB rating is typically not anything below 17. And I'm pretty sure the Fallout games are always like 16 plus. So the content, because it's open world, right, it's something that you got to be careful of. So it's interesting too. Is like the reason why the range is so different on this is we were taught different things. I know some kids that their parents teach them to be very autonomous and very forward thinking, and to start thinking about their own business at age 12, 13. My 7-year-old has a car wash in the neighborhood. He collects money. He does the advertising, all those other. Hey, Alyssa, hey, just go ahead and mute your mic if that's okay. Thank you. Well, you haven't muted it. There you go. So there's all kinds of interesting things when you look at the autonomy stage. Doesn't necessarily have to start at 18. The parental system can actually cause quite a bit of variation there in individuals. And that's separate from the cultural convention of 18, you're an adult, you're going to college, you're going to do your own thing and things of that nature. And, this is one of the key indicators that most developmental psychologists say that really leads to autonomy is, like getting away from the people who make decisions for you. And that can be, quite a challenge for some people to do. And when we look at this, right, I mean, obviously with COVID, we're in a unique historical time right now where moving away and spending money on things that you certainly don't need to spend it on is causing more individuals to sort of stay at home than move out and go to college and things of that nature, especially when a lot of social opportunities are removed on college campuses because of COVID. And Zoom and online classes are things that are very common. So interesting when you look at the data on this, on autonomy and sort of seeking out things. I think, folks, my summary on autonomy is going to be quite clear. It's, look, if this is something that culture is telling us we need to seek out, and it's something where we're now be given the opportunity because of the conventions of moving away to college and becoming an adult and things of that nature, it's a natural fit to explore and look at experiences that can give you freedom to choose what you want to do. First off, you get to choose the experience, then within those experiences you have freedom as well. And a lot of folks say that that's what college is all about. And it's about getting involved, doing these different experiences. I think it's interesting with our master's program, as our capstone experience is, once again, the way it's set up is you can choose where you want to go. You can explore them all, figure out what you want to do, and then go for it. We initially, when we were thinking about this experience, it was sort of like, okay, do we just force people into an experience, like the same experience? Everybody gets the exact same experience. And the faculty were like resoundingly like, no, like, don't do that, because these individuals are looking for choice. The gaming is a huge field, right? You can be an expert in so many things, but you have to want to choose a career path to explore. And so our thing was like, okay, let's give you as many opportunities as possible. We'll talk about career choice in a little bit, and exploration in how it relates to autonomy in a few slides, because I think it really helps out with how to do career choice appropriately in games as well. So just a few pieces of data, and people who live away at college. I thought these were three very interesting data points. They rely on their mental representations of their attachment figures. What this idea means is, like, you remember what your parents or people who raised you, mentors from those earlier years, like who they were. And as you start to become autonomous, you start to use those as like frameworks for how you need to make decisions. So when you're put in a place where you got to make a decision, you're like, I don't know which way this would go. You can, sort of think back, what would this person do? And that that's part of the thing of like, okay, now you're developing that sense of morality. Interesting thing too is, like, if someone is telling you what to do, that can cause friction. If you're no longer around someone who's telling you what to do, it actually leads to more positive thoughts about that individual, because that friction has been removed. So in general, the data suggests, significantly so, when people move out, they end up liking their parents more. And it takes a little bit of time, of course, because you got to reflect on that and understand, like, oh, that's no longer there, and you get your own autonomy, become set in that. But I don't know about you all, but I can remember it was about 2 years out of the house where I was like, I actually like these people now, more so than I liked them when I was in there, and just with the friction of like rules and doing it their way and things of that nature. And for me, it became kind of comical 6 or 7 years later, when their little rules would still pop up, and I'm like, hey, I'm an adult, I don't have to be here. I've got my own place, my own job. I can leave if I want to, but I would not do that. Any of you will have that experience, because you're in college right now, where you're going through, it's sort of like an uneasy truce, because they might be helping out with college, or you might be going home, but you're an adult and you've got these rules, and you're sort of like in this gray area. Anybody in that gray area right now, with having more positive thoughts and sort of being out from underneath the thumb of the people who control your life? Alex, where are you at?
I'm not sure I would call it a gray area. I don't think overall my relationship with my parents have changed too much. There has been a change. I will say that, especially since I've been living on my own. With how that relationship is, I wouldn't say it's so much like a an uneasy give and take, as some people may have it, but it's more of that like when I do go home and stuff like that, it's interesting like seeing like how much my behavior's changed since I've left because now I'm much more like kind of doing my own thing. It almost feels like well like there's no my parents, we still have a good relationship, like almost a guest in my own house because I'm so used to doing my own thing all the time that when
Yeah.
I'm over there I kind of have to remember like oh wait this is kind of their place, and then kind of
Mhm.
the same thing that if they come over to like if they visit me, I'm like hey like I you guys are my parents, but I kind of have a thing here. Can you try to respect a few things here? And usually they're pretty all right with it. It's like, hey, like this is how I like to keep my pantries, I keep my kitchen. Try not to mess with that system because it's gonna mess with me when you guys leave. So it's kind of interesting having that relationship compared to
Yeah.
how it used
Yeah.
to be when I was living under their roof and I was like following their rules like fairly to the T.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Uh, Jake, were you going to add something?
No, I was just kind of agreeing with what Alex said, where it becomes a little bit more of a divide in between you two, but not in a way that's like a bad thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's sort of it's weird because you're developing that sense of autonomy, but you still have to respect your parents, right? They're still your parents, and occasionally it's going to slip out. And it still slips out with my parents. We're like, well, we disapprove. And I'm like, well, I don't give a crap, but I respect your opinion. I'm not going to change. You know, I can do what I want now. This conversation that we're having right now, game designers at Bethesda, they understand it. They understand what we're looking for. They understand what autonomy means, and they understand their market. They study. If I were working on their Fallout games, which by the way, their second researcher ever at that company in UX came from our lab. He was the number two, the second UX person ever hired for the Fallout series, and he was the first real UX person who had been trained in it. And his entire time there was spent studying 16 to 24-year olds, like what do they want, how much freedom do they want, things of that nature. And when I listen to people who play those games, the decision making, the freedom, the conflict, you can make your own decisions, but if you join a guild you got to follow some of their rules, right? And some of your autonomy goes away. you know those things are very interesting in this world. And in game designers understand that stuff. They understand all the research surrounding autonomy, so they can kind of bring it in. So this conversation right here is right. If you have parents, right, and it's an open world game, but it's sort of built in the um, the feudal system, the knights and things of that nature, where family really matters. You have to have some of that friction in the game to make it real to players. It's like, well, yeah, you can do what you want, but you have to do certain things, because you're still ordered. And as you get older and you're in charge, you can do whatever you want later on. But there's always that little, I wouldn't call it friction, Jake and Alex. It's existing norms that are being reestablished. And because it's not necessarily friction, because Alex, doesn't sound like you deal with it in terms of saying, well, this is bad. You're just like, well, it's got to be dealt with, and we'll do it in a nice manner that keeps us as friends. And I'm not going to
Yeah.
piss them off, but certainly I'm not going to do what they want. Would that be accurate in saying that?
Yeah. I'd say that's about right.
Now, not all your friends are that way. Some people resist much
Oh
more
yeah.
strongly, which
Oh
can
yeah.
lead to a disruption of the relationship for quite some time. And of course, we know this, right? If you're living at home, and we already brought it up in this conversation, it can cause friction, right? Because you're living under their rules. You've got that sense of autonomy, but you're living under rules where it's like, well, I'm an adult, I can do what I want, but I'm living in their house. And a lot of developmental psychologists say this is where the friction comes in. So you can actually use this as the game design element too. It's like, the first thing you do is this rite of passage of fleeing the nest, right? And that's when you get the complete freedom to do whatever you want. And a lot of games they build into that. It's like the first thing you do is launch out. Some type of conflict occurs, and now you're going to launch out and do your own thing, and then you get that freedom to
I have a question about that, or at least an observation.
go for it.
So like I was thinking about that during the previous conversation about like getting freedom. I talk about like Bethesda RPGs.
Yeah,
I especially notice in games like Skyrim, where like you start off like quickly for this rite of passage to the intro of the game, and then you get freedom, but it still feels like they're kind of like holding your hand through it. And it definitely feels like there's a point where like it's more allowed to do more ambiguously moral things, like join the Dark Brotherhood, join the Thieves Guild.
yeah.
Is that kind of like related to this, or like this idea of like as you kind of grow independence, you can kind of do what you want more, and the game design a way to kind of encourage that behavior of that?
Yeah, certainly. It's almost like they walk you through the skill learning years in a more linear path, and then once you understand the basic systems, then you can go out and almost enter into the college years and be autonomous and make your own decisions. It's interesting you bring up Skyrim because I've got a colleague of mine who's both of their kids play Skyrim and they're young. And I was interested, it kind of, because I was giving this lecture already, I was like, well, that's interesting. I don't hear that too often of like a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old playing Skyrim. And they told me how they play it and what they're interested in it. And they're not interested in the role playing at all. They're interested in collection and skill learning and doing a repetitive task over and over again. And then occasionally just exploring, right? Just wandering around and seeing the world. But they're totally outside of like what we would consider the game loop for that product, where you're going off and building and becoming someone and making those moral decisions and things of that nature. So yeah, I find it interesting when you look at like these sandbox worlds. They're not designed nor marketed towards really young children because they're interested in something else. But they certainly have systems in place like skill learning that's more linear, where the kids can get it and they can understand it. And I don't think adults are any different from kids in that respect. Like we want to understand the systems, so we kind of need some bumpers for a little bit. And then once we understand the system, then we can explore. I think exploring skills in the systems and how they work, something that's really painful in video games. And that's why we've got to sort of like understand how does everything work before you set us free, even as we get older, for sure. So this is
funny enough. I actually remember at about that age, like 12 or 13, I actually played Skyrim for the first time as well, because I got the game for like free with my like Xbox 360 that I got it around that time. So and I actually kind of played it in a similar way where I wasn't super like focused on doing like the main story or anything like that. I just wanted to go around and explore and find new stuff. So
yeah, yeah. It's interesting, right? It's like if you look at what people are interested in, it relates to two things: rites of passage and biology, like what they're capable of doing. And then, of course, as you get into those later teenage years, you're still a child, but you have the brain behavior to really achieve and perhaps get into Skyrim at a deeper level, but perhaps not. You're kind of like, you go either way. And I think the variability in gameplay is quite large once you're in that neutral area, that gray area, where your brain is developed and you can do things, but you could also be autonomous. And because of your parents have influenced you to be a philosopher and seek out opportunities in life, the individual differences there are huge. And that's part of the problem with doing sample size with like anything from like 14 to 24 is there's so much variability. There's so many differences in how people approach products. Jake, some people still approach product as you when you were a child when they're 20. Like, what the heck? Like, you should play this game for the richness that it has. Like, well, I don't really care. And it could be that they don't care, right? They don't look for autonomous, open choices and freedom to do certain things because it doesn't matter to them because it's how they were raised. And so, but in your case, you're young enough to where you're still acquiring lots of skills and you're still you're not really interested in like moral philosophy, being something or someone, and that's your driving force. But it certainly is going to hit you squarely in the face when you hit 18 and you're like, oh, you're an adult. Magic wand. Get out of the house. Magic wand. Make your own decisions, follow your own career paths, and all these other interesting things. It's interesting. I have a lot of students from China where they say that's not the case in China. Your parents still have a lot of control of you, and it's expected, it's culturally allowed once you turn 18. And like they can influence what degree you go into and what college you go to, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. It's definitely not that way in the States, which could lead to some bad career choices in college, of course, if you just do something because it's fun. So interesting story on that. My first undergraduate degree was anthropology. And I remember people talking me out of it. I really enjoyed it. And it was a great degree in culture and all the cool stuff I got to do. But yeah, the only thing you could do is become an anthropologist and teach. That's it. So I was like, it's a fun one, but maybe I should have been more of an engineer. Eventually I switched and I found that, okay, like engineering psychology is got elements of anthropology, but it's a great career as well. So it was like it balanced things out in terms of what I want to do. It's kind of like playing an MMO and choosing the wrong career, and you play for 3 months and you're like, this game sucks because I'm completely ineffective at doing anything. So these are things we already talked about. These are game design elements for your product. Self-sufficiency. If I were measuring a game and we were writing questions for this game, and Brianna was here in this lecture because she's actually in our UX capstone, I would say, let's measure these on a 1 to 5 Likert scale. Can they make independent decisions? Can they take responsibility for their actions? In other words, deal with the repercussions of the decisions they've made? Can they get financial independence? You got to have that. Those 3 things have to be in place for someone to feel autonomous in a video game. And that's one of my favorite things is running businesses in these games and having some sort of system for gaining income, and it's predictable and I can grow and things of that nature. And then ultimately what's going to happen is their ego changes. They understand. You gotta be really careful with having games that have any type of sexuality in them because it changes the ESRB rating right to 17 and above. But obviously, like games like Grand Theft Auto, you can explore your own identity and from a sex perspective. But a lot of games are still steering away from that because it eliminates a large portion of the market to even explore that in video games. But you get a sense of morality as well. And you figure out like, okay, what do you like to do in that game? The career aspirations. And if that's done correctly, and that's the hardest thing to do is the career part in games. That's the thing that I think mostly gets people to quit these games if they choose something that's not the right fit. But either way, that's a challenge. I look at this slide as like, these are questions I would ask in an action open world adventure single player game. And if these are not satisfied, people will not want to play your game. So, I'd work very early on with game designers saying, okay, what features are we going to have in here? Here's the questions I'm going to ask. So I'm going to be judging you as soon as we have a build. And once we get that build, bam, I'm going to do this. And this, what's interesting is like the students who have gone off to work at companies like Bethesda, they think this way. Right? And they're like, okay, what is the designer intending to do? Let me measure what their intentions are and then go from there. The morality thing is related to autonomy, and it's an interesting way to think about it. It's basically that you're becoming autonomous, but you see yourself as this being that has some sense of morality. And one of the most fun things I have to do with my friends who play Fallout games is ask them, how do you play? And they instantly get it when I say that. So has anybody here played Fallout series games at all?
Yeah, fair bit.
Yeah.
Well, Taylor, if I ask you, how do you play? What would you answer to that?
I think I play like good. I play like on the good side of stuff. Like the first time around. at
Very,
least.
very boring, Taylor, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is very boring.
What's the fun part about playing as a non-moral person in these games? What do you think is attractive to people? Because when I ask people what's more fun when they play these games, 9 times out of 10, if they play Fallout series, they'll say something like, "Yeah, I played the first time, I'm like the moral," and then they're like, "When I played the second time, I had some fun." And I'm like, "Well, what does that mean?"
I know when I was young, I think it was just the experience because I played the biggest thing that drew me to Fallout 3 was my buddy showing me the fact that you could turn off or turn on a nuke inside of a city and then go to a hotel and watch the nuke explode from the city. And I was like, that's cool. So I think it's just like the experience you get from it.
Yeah, in other words, sometimes they have more unique game design elements when you play in a non-moral way. You're like, "Oh, well, that's really cool," you know, destruction in a way.
Yeah.
Kind of. So I guess it brings you back to the when you're like a toddler and you destroy someone's Legos. It's just fun to destroy. Do you find, Taylor, though, that they equally support playing non-morally and morally in these games, or do they support one perspective more so than others, specifically in the Fallout series?
I almost want to say that there's more going on for non-moral, if I can remember certain things.
Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I slightly disagree.
Yeah, so would I.
I think it's more geared towards being morally kind of being this helpful person as being non-moral. Not to say that there isn't non-moral elements. At least for
Yeah.
most of the Fallouts. I think New Vegas is a little different. I thought New Vegas definitely kind of gears itself to being you can go whatever path you want, which separates it a bit from the other games. But in like Fallout 3, Fallout 4, it's at least my experience. Then again, I've only really played as a moral guy. I haven't really taken the time to go be a gun-toting maniac. Maybe I should try that to see if it's a different
Yeah.
experience. But yeah.
Oh, it's definitely different. I'm going to ask because you might not be able to answer this one, Alex, but I'll ask it in a different way because we would measure this. We would say, where do you get higher arousal? And arousal is basically a reaction to the environment, and it could be from baseline as well, or obviously as you do unique things, you get higher levels of arousal as well. Are the game design elements for the average person who plays both morally and amorally or immorally, are they more arousing for which one? The moral choices or the non-moral choices? Think about from Grand Theft Auto 2.
I would say probably non-moral. I would say would be more arousing to a person who enjoys that stuff as compared to doing moral actions.
Yeah,
Moral
yeah.
actions, in a sense, because it is boring. It is like because it's doing the right thing, the thing we've been told to do. And while that's enjoyable, I say doing things that normally you're been told not to do or you can't do in real life is much more enjoyable because like, well, now I can do it here.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It's interesting, and I asked this question because that's why a lot of people, do deviant behaviors is because they get thrill seeking, right? It's why car insurance is so high for 18-year-old males, right? Or 16-year-olds, because their brain is slower at developing than their female counterparts, which leads to less inhibition. Like they do stupid stuff, but it can give you a thrill. It's like jumping out of a plane. Not necessarily something you need to do, but certainly gets arousal moving quite nicely. Blowing up a city. What is more potentially arousing than dropping a nuke and watching it blow up? It can become an extremely addictive to sort of, and not necessarily just because you like to do the bad stuff, simply because it deviates so far from baseline of how you actually act in the real world, which most people try to act in a way that's congruent with laws and conventions and things of that nature. So being in a video game where you get that sense of freedom to explore and engage in those high arousal situations is quite interesting. It's like you kind of figure out your boundaries and like, what are some of the potential things that I could do in terms of my morality within this autonomous world? What I find interesting is just this conversation. It's a fact that it leads to replayability as well, being able to make different choices, but not just different choices, like have a whole different pathway in terms of morality in these products. Now, I can't have this conversation with a bunch of 12-year-olds or 13-year-olds. They don't get it. They don't understand what we're talking about and why we are interested in this. But as you get a little bit older and you understand games and you understand morality, you can start to understand, okay, there's some interest in this. So if I were to ask these questions to an 11 or 12-year-old, I would get some very unusual responses. Oh yeah, I would always play the right way. I would do this and that. Well, very, very often I would get that. Or it'd be a really stupid response. I just want to have some fun. And they don't even understand the moral structure of the game and how it relates to the game design. They're just doing stupid stuff to do stupid stuff, but not because they want to experience non-moral behavior. It's because they want to see things blow up, which maybe later on in life, that's why we do those things still. But we understand the impact of that, right? And one of the fun things I love hearing about people who talk about Bethesda is there's doing the bad stuff, but then it's watching the people's reactions to you as you're a bad person. It's like the whole town dissolves away as you enter the town because they're like, well, he's going to destroy the town. And the chuckle that people give when that happens, I'm like, is that the most fun? Is that like the most enjoyable experience you had? And I asked one of the players who back in the day when we were studying Fallout, because we're looking at a competitor, it was like, yeah, that's the most fun right there. It's the reactions of other people. I do the event and it's quite fun, but I need those reactions. I need to see those behaviors actually occur in the world.
Need to be sold on the fact that you're being a terrible person.
Yeah. This discussion is a post-conventional discussion. We understand morality. We now can explore it and we can have some fun. The conventional discussion, right, is when you're starting to learn the rules of morality. That's 10 to 18. And the pre-conventional level, that's really challenging. That's like when you just got to have explicit rules to keep kids on track because they are Neanderthals, right? Their brain is developing, especially at age 4, 5, and 6. I mean, you want them to, like when someone takes their goldfish at lunch, it's like, just don't hit them. It's like any other behavior is fine, but certainly don't smack them in the nose because they took your goldfish. And then they smack them in the nose anyways and scream and throw stuff and poop their pants at the same time. So it's interesting. Like when I have this discussion, I'm like, the really unique game design elements of exploring morality and giving the game more depth is really important as you get 18 and older. Because it's, once again, in the West, the rites of passage almost demand that you explore this yourself. You go on your own journey. Your parents aren't there to tell you how to act anymore, right? They don't see anymore. So they just have to trust that you're doing what you want to do. And that's from a developmental psychology standpoint, the literature can't ignore rites of passage. They influence the brain as much as the brain influences behavior. And they feed on one another. It becomes like a loop. So I find it interesting when I talk about this and students write it up as a pillar. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful system, but obviously, when you're sort of writing up questions to measure morality in games, I always go to the multiple perspectives. Like, does the game allow multiple perspectives and a variety of moral situations? So I don't want to be forced to just be good or bad. I want that gray area as well. I want to have some fun with it. Sort of like alignments in Dungeons and Dragons. It's like neutral evil, chaotic evil. Anyways, they might have too many dimensions of morality to actually be of use.
Have you done this, like, thought of this morality stuff with the Fable series?
Yeah, go ahead and yes, go ahead. I'm interested in your thoughts.
I don't really know much to say about it. I do know that, like, as the games went on, they gave you more options for being good and bad. Like in Fable 3, you'd actually be able to like fart on people, scare people, and then as you get more evil, you get like more evil actions to do that are actually a little bit more evil than just like farting on people or around people. Um, but I thought they did a pretty good job at giving you a clear cut vision of what's bad and what's good the entire time. And then like they gave you pretty difficult morality decisions, I guess, like for opening like I forgot what they're exactly called, but they're like demon doors or something. And some of them are good, and I think you can do like good actions to open the doors, but there's other ones that are like eat a chick. And you have to eat a chick in front of the door to open it, and you're like, well, I don't want to be bad, so like I don't want to do that, or like that's
Yeah.
disgusting. I think when I was little I was like, that's disgusting, I don't want to eat a chick.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're actually talking about the second bullet point here, individual levels of moral reasoning depend on the kinds of moral challenges and situations encountered. I would turn what you just said into a series of UX questions for the product. It's like, are the challenges appropriate? You know, do they put you in unique situations where it makes you think when you make the decision? You know, and obviously you're reacting from a perspective of a young kid at the time, and that perspective is going to change when you're 18. And if the game is for everyone, and my age demographic is 12 to 60, I need to make sure that everybody's happy with those challenges and situations. It's okay if they perceive them as different and they analyze them differently when they make the decision, but I certainly want to have those ingredients be capable of capturing a large audience.
Yeah.
And what I don't want to have happen is dumb it down so much that a college kid is like, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel visceral to me. So yeah, I think that game does a really good job at giving you a visceral experience. And most Bethesda games do. Occasionally they have a dud, but I think most of them do a pretty good job. I always thought that Thief did a great job. I think Assassin's Creed attempts to do a pretty good job, but it's a little bit more on rails, you know, because the profession is such a big part of that game, and you kind of have like a profession. I think games allow you to have different professions and have like more flexibility.
I know Infamous Second Son did that. They had like I don't know if I only played Infamous Second Son, so I don't remember if the other games had like a good and bad system exactly, but I know like if you did bad, you had certain powers, and if you went good, you had different powers that way.
You know, the last bullet point here is something that is important too. It's like diversity of information, diversity of different relationships you can explore. That stimulates this whole moral reasoning system to say, wow, this is, I think from a game perspective, like if I'm measuring it, usually a person will say something like, I want to play it again. And I'm going to do it, you know, differently and have, you know, quite a bit of fun with it. So anyways, quite fun. So let's switch gears to career choice. We don't have many slides left to go, and it's going to kind of go fast, but this career choice is a fun one. And this is a recipe for design success in a video game, I think. And it gives you a unique perspective from the developmental psychology standpoint. Blah, blah, blah. Family background, right? Story setting that can influence your career choices. And certainly in a game, it can limit them. If you're like royalty and, you know, the game is like, okay, you're going to go towards a knight, and you give you a different type of knight or whatever else. But most games are going to give you a little bit more sandbox approach to that, where it's like the family background doesn't influence you as much. Your education doesn't influence you because you can choose whatever you want. You don't have to spend years in college. And also like the gender roles are almost completely eliminated now. Like boys and girls can both be knights and kings and leadership positions and things of that nature. But what I find interesting is if you look at the influences and the predictability of a person choosing a career choice in a game, they're still influenced by outside factors, socioeconomic factors, right? It's like, oh, do you want to be a thief or do you want to be a prince? Well, if you're wealthy, probably end up, you know, I kind of want to be a prince or whatever else, or things of that nature. Individual factors are certainly an influence component. When you're choosing to play a character class, motivation is critically important. And also work value and aspirations. Like, do you want to be a farmer? Like, do you seriously want to be a farmer? You'll know going into that, that's a lot of work. And I played Star Wars Galaxies when it first came out. If you were a farmer, you had to spend almost as much time farming as being a farmer in the real world. And that can certainly influence like your career decisions. I haven't seen a game do that, like career choices make them real world applied since that product. Social context can certainly influence what you want to choose. Family, school, peers, mentors, neighborhood, societal, historical factors, economic growth, right? And you can influence a person's career by changing the environment of the game, right? If you are a thief, right, and all of a sudden, there's a government program in Assassin's Creed where they're going to kill all thieves and you instantly die, that's going to change your career choice, right? You're going to be like, well, maybe that's not a good career choice anymore. And then, of course, identity development and experience. What I'm typically interested in is, when I do this from a UX perspective, is what's their first career choice and why? Is it an influence of previous games? Is it something that's more of like related to our first lecture in this class, something a little bit more related to their personality? But I'm also interested in like what career choices don't get chosen at all in the first go around. Doesn't mean eliminate them, because they might be a more complex career choice that's something someone explores the second or third time they play the game. But what I try to do here is, like, when I do measurement, I try to ask enough questions. I don't want death by survey, but I certainly want to know, why is someone choosing a career? And I could just be as simple as just asking them, like, oh yeah, so you chose paladin. Why the paladin? Like, what's your goal? I really like the moral justice that comes with it, and dishing out justice, and being a representation of charging first in the battle and things of that nature. Like, well, what do you do for a living? I'm a firefighter. I'm like, okay, yeah. It's not usually that clear cut. Like, it's usually much more complicated than that particular example. But that just gives you insight into like what we look at when we're looking at career choice or profession choice or class choice in a game, because it is very analogous to choosing a job, because that's what you're going to be in this product. You will all love this slide. I hope the one thing you remember from this lecture is this image. And sometimes I even stop this lecture on this image, because I'm like, just get this and you can help game companies. Game companies skip these steps all the time, and it pisses me off, and it pisses off hundreds of thousands of gamers too. These are the proper steps that a person should go through when they choose a career. First off, exploration. Playing with all the careers. One of the things, similar to what we try to do in this master's program, is like we kind of force you to look at a couple of capstones, like explore, please do not decide, explore, explore, explore. Games sometimes don't do a good job at this. They don't allow true exploration, like dabble. Sometimes in the first screen, it's like, choose a career. And you're like, well, what? I don't know. Like, can you show them all to me? Maybe a short video on each of them, and then I can decide, or do I have to go to YouTube? Crystallization is part of exploration. It's that point when you start to understand the bullet points of each career. In other words, you start to differentiate. It's almost like color theory. This one is orange, this one is green, this one is yellow, or personality theory. Like, you have to start to understand these are the bullet points of each of them. Pretty early on after that, once you have those bullet points, you do have to pull the trigger, right? You got to jump into something. You got to make that choice. Now, interestingly, how many games do you think skip exploration and crystallization and they go right to choice? Quite a few, would you say?
Probably a good majority of RPG games or games. Well, maybe like that's like 75%.
Yeah.
From the ones I've played.
And now I've heard from AAA game designers on this. What do you think the number one reason they say they don't do this is? And they usually don't blame themselves. They're like, oh, I know that's how it should be done.
Biggest reason I can think of is that the player actually never makes a choice.
Well,
Actually,
actually, much simpler than that. Money. We don't have time for it.
Hmm.
We don't have time to implement it. It's much like, implementing audio last in a game. It's like, well, we don't really need audio, but we put it there at the end, figure it out. But if you look at it, what ends up happening though is if you don't have exploration and you don't have some type of crystallization, and you just go right to choice, this one is going to be challenging to do. This is dissonance reduction. This is where you actually look for reasons to defend your choice. It's like, well, I chose, and now I'm going to defend it. And typically you're looking for logical reasons to explain to others why you chose that. And it could be as simple as someone coming up in an MMO and you're playing it and you're on TeamSpeak and they're like, hey, why'd you choose healer? And they say it in that tone and you're like, well, I got to defend my career. Well, I like it. It's fun. It's got all these aspects to it. And if you've had crystallization, you can defend it with logic. If you didn't have crystallization, you're probably going to get someone on the other side like, no, it actually really sucks. It's not the way you anticipate or think it works. And it doesn't work that way at all, especially at end game. So part of crystallization too is a bit of end game research. It's crystallization. It's the bullet points over time. This is what your early part of your career is going to look like. This is the middle part. This is the end part. And, with a healer, it would be really nice if they would tell me you're going to be completely ineffective until you're max level. And I think a lot of healers don't get that in MMOs. They're like, well, I'm going to jump into healing and be really effective. And your heals suck and people die, right? All the time. And you're like, well, I just got to grind it to max level. I go into that knowing that because I've learned that. I've been sort of like pushed in that direction. But you can really piss off a lot of players, especially like assassins. They're pretty much useless in MMOs until you get like those ultimate skills or things of that nature. Fighters, right off the bat, they're good, right? Range characters, right off the bat, they're good. And they're great at end level too. But one of the things that really irritates me in some games is like they don't really give you a good understanding of what you're getting into. They might let you explore, but they don't teach you anything, and certainly not memorable. So either of these two things can be listed. Clarification is a really fun one. It's going to happen in any game. You're going to defend. You're going to try to reduce any reasons why you shouldn't play that class in your own head to justify the amount of time you've already expended. Humans do that all the time. Choose a career, the career sucks, they defend it anyways. Well, the good side of it is I get every 15th Saturday off. It's like, that's called dissonance reduction. It's coming up with a reason to do something in a career that you probably got into by accident and you don't even want to do it anymore, but you invested so much time in it, you're stuck. And so you defend it with very illogical defenses. The socialization phase is another thing that a lot of game companies don't do. It's sort of like you're in as that career. Now we're going to surround you with people who are in that career as well, so they can teach you the best way to do it. And it's like an internship. Most games don't have internships for the career choice you've played with. Your internship is like, do you have another friend in your guild who's playing that career as well, and they're ahead of you, and you could ask them questions. But they don't have like guild halls for that particular career choice. Interestingly, Star Wars Galaxies did, and I know that game's 20 years old, but they had a huge population as the first MMO out. It beat World of Warcraft by a couple of years. So you're talking millions of gamers playing, and they built guild halls. So if you had a career, you had to do all your learning in that hall, so people had to go there. And you would be surrounded by like 50, 60 gamers, and you could just ping someone and ask them questions. And of course, most people wouldn't help you out. They tell you to go away in a not so nice way, but at least there was that socialization internship sort of thing that occurs in college where like, if you want to be an engineer, you go to the engineering building, you study in that building, you're surrounded by engineers, you see the clubs and societies, and you sort of become part of that world. And it helps you in that profession be better. The innovation is something that's like getting to level 80, right? And it's like, okay, now you're at the top and you're going to explore that career. And then the integration of the mutual influences, that's actually where you're changing the career itself. So you're like giving back, and you're, the old sage, you're the wise one who's, doing things in the game to, pave new paths for people who are going to come behind you. And that doesn't exist in games. I mean, I think from a game design perspective, that's probably just too hard for companies to implement. So when I look at this, I say, look, if you want people to not quit, please give them better exploration and crystallization at a minimum. You got to have this in there. I can't tell you how many times I join MMOs. We go in with a group of 20 people, 20 friends, 20 people who I played MMOs with over the last 15 years. And we go from one MMO to the next. I can predict that 25% of them are going to choose the wrong career and will quit that MMO within 3 months, because they're going to invest in it. They're going to put time and energy into it. And they're going to get to a point where they're doing clarification or dissonance reduction, and they don't want to defend the career. They're like, this career sucks, or this class really is terrible. And then they quit the game. And then we're stuck with less friends in it. And they go back and play a different game. And now they're fracturing the social group. And it can be quite a challenge to continue playing, because once your social group starts to break up, and if you happen to play MMOs because you want to socially engage with the people that you've played MMOs with in the past, that can be, something that's a challenge to do. Have any of you seen that when it comes to career choice, where someone like MMOs or whatever else? I know they're not as popular as they used to be, but does any of that sort of resonate, or you have any stories or things you can add to this particular topic?
I've kind of done that exact same thing, except I didn't drop out of playing the game for it. When I started playing Final Fantasy 14, I was like, oh, I want to be a healer. And there was only one starting class that was a healer, and it was Conjurer, which becomes White Mage, which is like, your be-all, end-all. They're just the healer. And I played like 50 levels of White Mage, and I went, wow, this is really boring.
Yeah.
And I mean, luckily in that game, compared to something like World of Warcraft, in Final Fantasy, you can just literally go pick up another job and level it. There's no, you're not stuck on one, which is nice. So I went and I picked up a different healer, and I played that for a while. And now I've moved on, and I'm playing tank now. So
yeah,
I've definitely shifted around a lot.
It's interesting. It took World of Warcraft a long time to learn what you just said. They didn't allow you to have multiple characters on the same server. It was like, you get one character and that's it. And it's like, okay, if I'm on this server and I have one character and I hate what I'm doing, I have to delete it and start over. Do I really want to delete all that effort? Even though it sucks, it's effort. I'm deleting effort and I'm starting over. It's an interesting situation to be in, isn't it? When you think about it from that perspective.
And that's the other nice thing too. You don't even have to make a new character at all. You can literally just do it on the same character.
Oh, just re-spend your skill points that you've already earned or whatever else.
It's basically the way it works in Final Fantasy is you level up your specific job, right? And say you get that job to like level 30, level 40, and you go, okay, I don't want to play this anymore. You go to the guild hall for another job, and you can pick up that job and play that job at level 1 and level it up. But if you wanted to go back, you can just switch back and you'll still be level 40 on your other job. They all level independently of each other on the same character.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. And Star Wars Galaxies didn't do that. Once you reshuffled your skill points, you lost stuff. And you had to actually redo it again if you wanted to get back into it. And it's like, it didn't, like almost like memory doesn't exist. So what they're doing there is they're making it more analogous to the real world. It's like, hey, if you want to grind, and then choose a path, then go for it. So it's actually a pretty good system, which now it doesn't necessarily mean that game has good crystallization exploration, but they have what we would call a safety net to someone quitting, right? They're going to reduce the amount of friction you're going to feel later on and possibly keep you in the game. Whereas a lot of games don't do that. It's like, oh, you chose poorly. Well, that sucks. Play again. And they think that's replayability. Like, guys, or folks,
It's not replayability.
that's not replayability. That's called
just tedium.
Yeah, that's called grind. And grind is not good for grind's sake. So yeah, it's interesting from that perspective.
That's one thing that I had as like kind of a trouble of trying to get into World of Warcraft, because after playing Final Fantasy for like 700 hours, I was like, oh, I want to try WoW. I want to try the competition. And it's really awkward to have to make a character, try out a class, and then have to play for a while maybe to even understand what the class is about and what the class does. And then if you go, oh, I don't really like this one, then you have to go back all again and start over. So yeah, I completely agree. This one is interesting. We got to get moving because I only have 12 minutes left to finish this up, and then the lecture is going to be too long for the online students. But we can continue chatting later on today. Private public faces of individuals. It's like, how do you present yourself? And I think this is the one where in games, we talked about this in the first lecture, there's a little bit of freedom to not really worry about this as much, which is essentially, how do you act to people in the, when you're out in public, and then in private, you actually have a different identity. Now, the science says that these two things start to merge in the college years, to become the same. There's a sense of these things giving you the ability to, become more confident in yourself. So your private self becomes your personality publicly. But certainly it's still, having those two different selves gives you a sense of, control over your life. Like, you can not worry about getting fired and being perceived as unusual, and you can still be yourself when you're in private. But they tend to merge a little bit as you get older. And certainly as, a lot of people look at the West and they're like, by the time you're in your 40s, you don't care what people think about you anymore. You're just who you are. And there certainly is some truth to that. But when you look at video games, you have a lot of flexibility to not worry about this individual identity versus identity confusion. Actually, being variable is something that's really wonderful about games, because there are very few repercussions. There's anonymity, right? Obviously, if people acted in League of Legends with their real name next to their character and their Facebook link next to it and their LinkedIn link next to it, people would not act the way they act in League of Legends, right? Because it's like, oh, you're that person and you act that way. It's like, I'm going to attack you socially, which is why I think, games can never do that. They have to keep you, sort of, removed from your public identity. The problem with that is that's where you get a lot more deviant behavior, because if this isn't so much of a crisis in video games, you're going to have people not care about this. It's like, well, I can be deviant and it's never going to be connected to my public image. And if that's the case, it's like, the way you are in private, perhaps, if you are quite different from your public image, times 10, towards non-moral decision making. And that's where you get some interesting differences in games. So I always find this interesting when I cover this with AAA game companies. I'm like, this is part of the reason why people play games. And it kind of relates back to autonomy and playing differently and exploring and things of that nature. But, as Alex said earlier, it doesn't mean someone's not going to play as they are in the real world. Some people will continue to just say, like, I'm always going to play the good character. I tend to do that a lot in Dungeons and Dragons, not just because I like playing the good character. It's because my friends already have picked assassin and ranger and barbarian and magic user. And I'm like, okay, well, someone needs to be the paladin / healer cleric. And so I'll do it because I enjoy it anyways, but it's like a role that, the other folks don't want to take. So anyways, interesting here. Would you all agree with me that this is not as much of a crisis in games, but it can actually promote negative behaviors as well in games?
I agree.
Yeah, it amazes me on Facebook when people do stupid stuff on Facebook with their real name. And I'm like, what? You people, foolish. Okay. This one right here is basically looking at the contents of identity, and once again, not too much of an impact in games, but is interesting. That when you look at the structure of your identity that you develop in a game, I could measure it in this way: is like, is there good content? Is there a good belief system that supports that particular identity, like who you've become? Do you clearly understand where you're at? Some games do that well. Like if you're a thief in this guild, this is your identity, and that identity becomes part of your decision making. And then the evaluation is the importance part of it. It's like to be an assassin in a game, and you have all these portions of conduct, right? Like how you're supposed to act. Which one is the most salient to you? Which one is the one that is the most significant? And is that a driving force in the game? That's how I use this particular slide to measure like career choice. It's like, and I also want to know, like, based on your career choice or your profession and your identity, which element of that choice system is the most important, and does the game design support it? I think those are two really important ones. This one is related to career choice, achievement, foreclosure, moratorium, and confusion. This right here explains if it always is going to predict if a person's going to quit the game or not. Because in the real world, you have some stickiness to this system because you've kind of invested so much time and effort that you're kind of stuck sometimes in your career, even though you don't like it. Identity achievement is when you choose a career and it all goes perfect. The crisis is that you experience the friction of that career and you still are okay with it. You understand the pros and cons. That's the crisis part. And you're okay. They balance out. There's more pros than cons, and there's certain parts of the pros, aspects of the pros that you like more than other aspects. And therefore, you understand the career you're getting into. And then you commit to it by investing your time and energy, further education, internships, et cetera, right? That's like, if someone does that in a video game with a class, they're probably going to stay in that class for a long period of time and be quite satisfied with the class. Number one, they went through the pros and cons, learned them, balanced them out, understood what they were getting into, and then they started investing the time and energy to be an expert in that profession. The next one is kind of interesting. Foreclosure. Absolutely no crisis at all. They just commit right away to the career. And I had a couple students from China a couple months ago, and the province they were in, they were like, that's exactly how it works in our province. Like, you don't get to choose your career. Your parents tell you what you're going to do. You're going to be an engineer. That's it. And you go to school and you can choose between 3 different types of engineering. And sometimes you're even pushed that way, to particular type. And I've had a couple students in here in this degree program who were specifically in GDMS because they were like starting a second career and their parents forced them into one career and they did not like it. And they finally resisted it. Now they're going to go into gaming because they love games and they see it as a profession. They're passionate. They want to be part of creating those products for people. So it's interesting when you look at the commitment part, if someone chooses a career path based off of this, it's really bad, especially in games, because they're very likely to quit your game eventually because they don't even understand why they got into it. They don't understand the pros and cons, and the cons might actually outweigh the pros. The moratorium is an interesting one. I hate playing games with these next 2 people because in the moratorium, they understand the crisis, but they don't commit to anything. These are your people who play an MMO and they level up 10 level 10 characters to level 10 or level 20. And you're like, hey, we've got to move on to end game content and you can't play with us anymore. And I'm not going to loan you a character, to log in and play. And it's interesting when you look at this right here. World of Warcraft gave you, max level characters for 2 reasons. The game has been around so long, they don't want people playing and not being able to play with anybody. And then number 2, they don't want people to sort of not be allowed to, that have been playing for a while and they aren't leveled up completely, to not be able to play with people who have committed and level up characters and are doing end game content. So these individuals I've played with many times, and I'm like, what are you doing? You know, you can't play every character to level 20 in the first. You got to level one thing up and have that be something you can play with us with, and then you can go back and do all that stuff later on. But they're like, oh, I just want to explore the game. Like, well, the game's built on like socially grouping and accomplishing tasks. Otherwise, you can't get content for your character to be proficient in anything. And they just don't understand that. The identity confusion are even worse to play with. They don't really, they're a floundering fish in a game. They come in and they don't choose anything. They don't really explore anything appropriately. They're like your lost souls in the game. You're like, what are you doing? You got one character level 2, another character level 16, another character level 4. You play all of them the wrong way. So you really don't understand the classes and what they're supposed to do. And I usually find with these people, they're just in there for some other reason, like socially, they just want to be with a person or two, like girlfriend, boyfriend type stuff going on. And they're just not into it at all. And very lazy as well, and things of that nature. So when I look at these types of classifications, I talk about measurement. I usually ask the game designer, like, how can we measure this once the game launches to evaluate each career and evaluate people who are choosing careers and play styles? And how does this predict retention in the game as well? Obviously, we want people to be retained in the game. So we want people to have identity achievement, because that's going to lead to stickiness. They're going to stay around for long periods of time. So interesting slide. You all get that? I hope I didn't go through that too fast, but I'm running out of time. So wanted to sort of cover it nicely. That can become its own pillar, talking about that particular slide. I already talked about the identity confusion part. Identity confused individuals are less conscientious, more likely to experience negative emotions, and more disagreeable. Can't agree more with that. Those are like the people who come and play and they're a friend of a friend and they're playing in the MMO, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait till this person quits. You know, it's like a lot of friction when you're trying to do group stuff. So role experimentation, most important part. Yeah, we call that the central process of the college years. It's being able to do lots of different things and explore. And if you can't do that in the real world, people are certainly going to want to do it in video games, which creates a very interesting target market for us. It's like building games that have high cognitive complexity and they fit the rites of passage nicely. And there's just so much richness to explore. And certainly younger kids are going to play these games, but they're not going to play them the same way that the older individuals, older per se, 16, 17, 18 to 24 are going to approach these products in general. Yeah, this is just another graph summarizing some of the things we've already talked about. There's types of individuals, level of commitment with level of exploration on this dimension. So low level of commitment, low level of exploration gives you an avoidant, contradictive, procrastination type personality. High level of commitment, low level of exploration gives you someone who forecloses, like they don't really explore things, but they commit to the first thing they do. They're the non-thinkers that a lot of people say. And then obviously, if you have high level of exploration and a moderate level of commitment, you're more of an information type. You're exploratory, but you might not actually commit and be good at anything. So a lot of people say individuals like a balance. You want to be right in here. 75% exploration, 75% commitment, and then you end up having someone who understands the world they live in, but will also commit to something. And it's really hard to do in games because, once again, budgets. It's really hard to get the exploration right in games. Certainly you can have people commit. That's called leveling and the grind and things of that nature. But the exploration part has to be there in order to produce true stickiness in a product. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of uninformed decisions being made that lead to, bad stuff. And these are the last two slides we've already talked about. Fidelity to other ideologies. We talked about that briefly in the other slides when it came to autonomy. And then, of course, we already talked about this. This is the 5-stage model of ethnic minority identity development. And it's like when individuals come into a new culture, how do they adapt? And it's interesting. It's conformity, trying to adapt first, dissonance, trying to, reduce the friction of those adaptations, and then the other ones, pop in there as well. So anyways, same assignment. There's a lot of really cool stuff you could talk about today. You have the example. It's posted in month 2. And it's for the 12 to 18 range. So once again, if you have any questions, reach out to me. So let me just go ahead and stop the recording.